Now listen to me closely, because what I'm about to share with you is not just a word, it's a warning. It's not just inspiration, it's revelation. And if you lean in for just a moment, if you open your heart and quiet your distractions, I promise you this won't just be another speech. This is a divine appointment. There are moments in history where God doesn't whisper, he thunders. Where he doesn't just allow something to happen, he orders it. And what I saw, what God showed me, was one of those moments. July 29, 2025 is not just another date on the calendar. It is a spiritual pivot point. It is a line in the sand drawn by the hand of heaven. It is the day God removed power from someone who thought they were untouchable. But let me be clear. This isn't about politics. This isn't about platforms. This is about principle. This is about a holy God who says, I will not be mocked. I will not be sidelined. I will not sit silently while pride rises and righteousness is trampled. So this is about the way we act and in what way we act upon the world God showed me this ahead of time, not so I could brag, not so I could boast, but so I could warn you, prepare you, wake you up. Because when God reveals, he expects a response. When he speaks, he expects you to listen. This message is for those who've been praying in private, for those who've been weeping in silence, for those who've been wondering, Lord, do you see what's going on? Oh, yes. He sees and he moves, not on our clock, but on his. Now, if you walk with me for the next few minutes, if you'll open your ears and close out the noise, I believe God is going to confirm some things in your spirit. He's going to stir your faith. He's going to help you understand why things are shifting, why the ground is shaking, and why he chose this exact moment to act. So stay with me. Don't let distraction steal your deliverance. Because what God showed me is not just about the fall of one man, but about the rise of a remnant. And you, my friend, are part of that rising. Would you like this to lead directly into key point 1 now? Let me tell you something. God never just shows up without a purpose. He doesn't reveal something so significant, so specific, without already having a plan in motion. When God spoke to my spirit and showed me the removal of power happening on July 29, 2025, I didn't take it lightly. This wasn't a dream that faded with the morning. It wasn't a thought that passed with the hour. It was a divine interruption, a holy notification. And I knew that God was giving advance notice, not for entertainment, not for speculation, but for alignment. You see, too many of us are shocked by what we should have been prepared for. We get caught off guard by shifts that heaven already scheduled. That's because we've been so distracted by the noise of culture, the clamor of opinions, the headlines of fear, that we forgot the God who still speaks. We've grown so accustomed to reacting in the natural that we've stopped discerning in the spirit. But make no mistake about it, God always gives his people warning before the shaking. He always reveals before he removes. That's how he operates. He doesn't just tear down kings and leaders without first sounding the alarm. He didn't just bring down Pharaoh without sending Moses. He didn't just dismantle Babylon without speaking to Daniel. He didn't just remove Saul without calling Samuel. And he's not just removing influence in our day without whispering to those who are listening. When God allows you to see something in the spiritual realm before it happens in the natural, it's not for you to sit on it, it's for you to prepare. It's for you to posture yourself in faith and obedience. It's for you to get into position because the ground is about to shift. And some of you, God's been showing you things. He's been waking you up at odd hours. He's been pressing thoughts into your spirit that don't go away. He's been highlighting scriptures you can't ignore. That's not your imagination. That's invitation. He's saying, come up higher, see what I see, know what I'm about to do, because I want you ready before the shaking begins. And when I say removed from power, I'm not just talking about the seat someone sits in. I'm talking about the authority that God allows them to carry. Because real power doesn't just come from position, it comes from permission. It comes from heaven's endorsement. And when God withdraws his permission, that person may still look like they're in control. They may still wear the title. They may still have the followers and the platform. But spiritually, they're bankrupt. Spiritually, the oil has dried up. And all that's left is the outer shell. Now, don't miss this. God can let someone stay in a position for a season, even after he's removed his hand, just to let it be seen that they've been fired by heaven before they're dismissed by man. Saul still sat on the throne after God anointed David. Pharaoh still had chariots after God raised up Moses. But the outcome had already been decided in heaven long before it was visible on earth. That's how God works. He moves first in the invisible, so that when it becomes visible, those with spiritual ears can say, we already knew. God already told us. And when God showed me this moment, this specific moment, this date, it wasn't wrapped in confusion. It wasn't foggy or symbolic. It was clear. And that clarity came with weight, not pride, not superiority, but a burden to share, a burden to sound the trumpet, a burden to let the people of God know he's still speaking, he's still warning, and he's still moving. But here's the part we can't miss. When God reveals something, he's also checking your response. Will you respond with fear or faith? Will you treat the revelation as casual, or will you carry it with conviction? Because revelation without response is rebellion. If God shows you a storm coming and you don't build the ark, that's on you. If he tells you to get in alignment and you stay in your comfort zone, that's on you. He reveals so that you can realign, so you can ready your heart, so you can clean house and cut ties with anything that would be a weight when the shift hits. There are people who've been warned over and over, but they're still clinging to idols, still bowing to popularity, still chasing platforms, still playing church. But the shaking is coming. And when God removes power, he doesn't give a courtesy call. He doesn't take a poll. He moves decisively, completely, and in such a way that no one can take credit for it but him. And when that happens, all those who mocked your conviction, all those who laughed at your urgency, all those who rolled their eyes when you said, God showed you, they're going to see. But this moment isn't just about one person falling. It's about the people of God remembering that he still rules. He still reigns, and he still has the final say. It's about rediscovering the fear of the Lord. It's about waking up and realizing that nothing and no one is above the reach of God's justice. So if he allowed you to see the fall before it happened, it means he's calling you to stand when it does, not to gloat, not to celebrate someone's collapse, but to bear witness that this was God's doing, and it is marvelous in our eyes. Because if he showed it to you before it happened, then he's also prepared you to stand in the aftermath, to speak truth, to bring clarity, to remind a confused world that God isn't sleeping, he's watching, he's judging. And when he decides it's time to shift the balance of power, no title, no money, no influence can stop him. So don't miss the gravity of this moment. This isn't a coincidence. This is a confirmation. God revealed it before he removed it, because he wants your faith anchored, not shaken when the dust settles. And let's get something straight right now. When someone is removed from power, it's not just a shift in the natural, it's a statement from the spiritual. It's not random, it's not accidental, it's not a coincidence cooked up by human agendas. No, when God steps in and says, enough, what you're seeing is judgment in motion. What you're witnessing is heaven's gavel slamming down on corruption that has been tolerated too long. God doesn't act without cause, and he doesn't bring down power unless something has violated his standard. You see, we've gotten so used to people rising and falling on the basis of popularity, election, social status, or scandal that we've forgotten there's another court that governs the affairs of man. And that court doesn't need headlines or hashtags. That court doesn't sway with public opinion. That court doesn't wait on surveys or approval ratings. That court sits in the heavens and moves according to truth, justice, and holiness. When God removes someone from power, it's not the end of a chapter, it's the enforcement of righteousness. Don't think for a second that God is passive when wickedness is parading in high places. Don't imagine he's blind to injustice or deaf to the cries of the oppressed. No, he is patient, but not powerless. He is long-suffering, but not indifferent. And when his patience runs its course, his judgment begins to roll like thunder. The problem is that we often misinterpret his patience as permission. Just because he allows someone to stay seated for a season doesn't mean he approves of what they're doing. Power that is not submitted to God always becomes polluted. When someone rises to a place of influence but refuses to bow to the one who gave them breath, what they're doing is storing up consequences. And God, in his mercy, often gives them space to repent. He'll whisper, he'll convict. He'll send warnings through people, through circumstances, through dreams and disruptions. But when the warnings are ignored and pride becomes the throne they sit on, God will eventually do what only he can do. He'll remove. This is where many people get confused. They say, why would God allow someone to have power if he knew they would abuse it? But let me ask you, why would God allow you to have free will knowing how many times you'd ignore him? It's the same mercy, it's the same grace. God gives people space to walk in humility, to steward power with integrity, to influence others for righteousness. But when that power turns to pride, and that influence becomes poison, he will not let it go unchecked. The fall of power is not a glitch in God's system, it's a result of rejecting his authority. And when God showed me the removal that took place on July 29, 2025, I didn't just see a seat being emptied, I saw heaven issuing a verdict. This was not a political decision. It wasn't a boardroom negotiation. It was a spiritual eviction notice. God had weighed the actions, the intentions, the consequences, and the resistance to his voice, and he said, that's it, no more. Now hear me. This is not about celebrating someone's downfall. This is not about pointing fingers and saying, I told you so. This is about recognizing the weight of divine judgment. When God moves like this, it ought to make us tremble, not cheer. It ought to draw us closer, not make us casual. Because if God can remove them, he can deal with us too. It's a call to holiness, not haughtiness. You see, there's something sobering about knowing that no one is too powerful for God to humble. No one sits so high that God can't reach them. He doesn't need to use worldly systems to accomplish his will. He can, but he doesn't have to. He can speak a word and everything shifts. He can allow a moment, a scandal, an exposure, a reversal, a consequence to rise up and dismantle everything someone built in their own name. And when that happens, don't miss it. Don't write it off as politics. Don't dismiss it as coincidence. Recognize it for what it is. Justice rolling like a river. We live in a time where people love to wear crowns but hate to carry crosses. They want the throne but not the accountability. But authority without submission is dangerous. And what God does in his righteousness is not just protect his people, he also purifies leadership. He removes those who stand in rebellion so he can raise up those who walk in obedience. It's not just about who falls. It's about what God wants to build next. And if you've ever wondered why God allows injustice to continue for so long, understand this. God waits because he's merciful. He waits because he wants repentance. But the longer someone rejects his mercy, the shorter their window becomes. Until one day the window closes and the season shifts. That's what happened here. God waited, God warned, but when the appointed time came, July 29, 2025, he moved quietly to some, suddenly to others, but divinely without a doubt. And here's the thing. God didn't do it to prove a point. He did it because his name is on the line. He will not allow his truth to be trampled by those who claim to serve him but live in contradiction. He will not be used for personal gain. He will not sit silently while the platform he allowed is polluted with pride, deception, or manipulation. When the cup of iniquity is full, his justice overflows, and it's swift, it's final, and it's right. So when you see someone removed from power, don't just focus on the person, focus on the God who reigns. Ask yourself, Lord, what are you saying in this? Because every act of judgment is also a message. It's God reminding the earth that he still governs, that he still rules, that he still holds kings and presidents, pastors and leaders, rulers and influencers, all accountable to him. And if you take nothing else from this moment, take this. God will not be mocked. He will not let rebellion remain unaddressed. And when he moves in righteousness, in truth, and in power. Some of y'all need to realize you're not just watching prophecy unfold, you are part of it. This moment, this shift, this divine interruption wasn't just shown to you so you could say, wow, look at what God did. No. God revealed it so you could say, Lord, what do you want me to do? Because when heaven speaks, it's not looking for spectators, it's calling for servants. This isn't entertainment. This isn't spiritual news reporting. This is a mandate to move. You've been given insight not to sit in silence, but to stand in truth. You've been shown this moment in advance so that when everything shakes, you don't shake with it. God gives revelation to those he trusts with responsibility. He didn't show it to you so you could scroll past it or casually nod your head and keep it moving. He showed it to include you in it. That insight you carry, that discernment stirring in your spirit, that thing you couldn't explain but you knew was real, that wasn't imagination. That was God tapping you on the shoulder and saying, you're part of this. When God is shifting the balance of power, he doesn't just move in high places, he awakens people in low places. He begins to stir the hearts of men and women who've been walking in the shadows, praying in the dark, weeping between the porch and the altar. People who've been saying, Lord, use me, even when nobody else saw their preparation. And then he begins to connect the dots. He gives you clarity in moments that seemed confusing before. And suddenly you realize this is what I was born for. This is why I've been restless. This is why he pulled me away from certain people, places, and patterns. You are not random. You are not irrelevant. You are not an extra in the background of someone else's story. You've been planted on purpose, for a purpose. And this moment is proof of that. You were chosen to be a witness, chosen to be a voice, chosen to carry what others ignored. When others were chasing popularity, you were being refined in secret. When others were platform building, you were character building. When others were performing, you were praying. And now that the shaking has begun, the stage is being cleared, not for entertainers, but for the equipped. Don't you dare minimize the burden God placed on your heart. Don't you brush off the fact that you felt it before it happened. Because when God shows you something before the crowd sees it, he's also handing you a responsibility. You're meant to bring perspective when confusion sets in. You're meant to speak peace when panic hits. You're meant to interpret the moment when others are disoriented. The shaking is not your signal to retreat, it's your call to rise. God always preserves a remnant. And that remnant isn't always loud, but they're locked in. They're not always in the spotlight, but they're always in alignment. He whispers to them before the storm so they won't be overwhelmed in it. And if God gave you eyes to see this removal before it reached the headlines, then you're carrying prophetic weight, whether you realize it or not. You've been marked by heaven to stand in the gap between what was and what's coming. So don't sit this one out. Don't shrink back into passivity or pretend you didn't hear what he said. You've been prepared for such a time as this. There were moments you didn't understand why your life took the turns it did, why the doors you wanted stayed shut, why the people you thought would walk with you fell away. But now it's becoming clear. God wasn't punishing you, he was positioning you. He was clearing distractions, he was fine-tuning your ears, because what you're about to speak into will require precision, boldness, and clarity. It will require that you've heard from him, not just from trends or opinions. And make no mistake about it, when God pulls someone down, he's getting ready to raise someone else up, but not in the way the world thinks, not just into titles or stages. He's raising up voices, voices that carry weight, voices that carry authority, not from degrees or status, but from intimacy with him. And when you speak what he's revealed, you're not just throwing around thoughts. You're delivering truth, and truth always hits differently when it's been processed through fire. Some of you have felt isolated, misunderstood. You've tried to explain what you see, and people brushed you off like you were being dramatic or hyper-spiritual. But God was showing you ahead of time, not so you could convince them, but so he could confirm you. This moment wasn't just to expose someone else, it was to activate you. God is using this removal not just to clean house, but to rebuild with new voices, fresh anointing, and a return to holiness. You're not just part of the audience, you're part of the assignment. So stop playing small, stop hiding behind humility when really it's fear. If God showed you, it means he trusted you, and if he trusted you, he expects a response. Your revelation was never supposed to stay private forever. Yes, there's a time to be silent and a time to speak. But now is the time to declare, not for your glory, but for his. Not to elevate yourself, but to explain what God is doing in this hour. When others are confused, you bring clarity. When others panic, you point them to peace. When others say, what's going on? You say, God already told us. Because this didn't catch heaven off guard, and it shouldn't catch his people off guard either. When the world starts searching for answers, your obedience will become the bridge between their chaos and God's truth. This is the time to rise, not in arrogance, but in authority, not because you're better, but because you're ready. You've been tried, tested, and trusted, and now it's time to walk in the role God prepared you for. Because you're not just seeing prophecy fulfilled, you are the fulfillment of a prayer somebody once prayed. You're the evidence that God never leaves his people without a voice. You're part of the plan, part of the proof, and part of the prophetic shift. Don't just watch it happen, walk in it. Now hear me. When God removes someone from power, it's never just about the fall. It's always about what's coming next. See, too many people get caught up in the spectacle of someone being taken down, but they miss the sacred responsibility that follows, because when one is removed, the kingdom doesn't pause. Heaven doesn't go quiet. No, God is always moving toward the next thing. And if he clears a seat, it's because he's preparing someone else to sit in it. If he shuts a door, it's because he's opening another for someone who's been waiting, watching, and walking in obedience. God is not just about subtraction, he's about succession. When he removes power from the hands of the disobedient, he's getting ready to place it into the hands of the faithful. And that's where you come in. This moment wasn't just a divine takedown, it was a divine setup. A setup for his people to rise, a setup for the righteous to lead, a setup for those who've been tested in the dark to shine in the light. And not for applause, but for assignment. This is the season where the hidden must become heralds. The ones who have been on their faces in prayer, the ones who didn't compromise when it was easier to quit, the ones who kept their oil full when others were falling asleep. God is calling you. It's time for the people of God to step into the space that's now been made available. This isn't the time to shrink back. This isn't the time to play it safe. This is the moment to rise. Not in your own strength, but in the strength that comes from knowing you were prepared for this. The throne has been emptied because heaven is looking for new vessels. Not perfect ones, not polished ones, but postured ones. Hearts bowed low before the king, hands ready to serve, voices yielded to truth. This is not about celebrity. This is about surrender. It's not about platform. It's about purpose. Because when God shifts power, he's also shifting responsibility. And if you're hearing this right now, it's because God is calling you to carry some of that weight. You can't afford to stay casual when God is making things clear. You can't afford to stay silent when God has handed you a message. You can't afford to watch from the sidelines when God has already qualified you in private. Some of y'all have been waiting for someone to give you permission, but God already did when he showed you what was coming. That insight wasn't just information. It was invitation. It was God saying, get ready. I'm about to move, and I want you to move with me. And let me tell you this, the rising isn't going to look like what you thought. It won't always come with titles or recognition. It might not happen on a stage or in the spotlight. It might begin with a conversation, a decision, a step of obedience nobody else sees. But that's how God works. He builds leaders from the inside out. He anoints before he appoints. He calls you before people confirm you. So don't wait for the crowd. Walk in the calling. You were never meant to blend in with the noise of the crowd. You were meant to be a voice in the wilderness, a light in the darkness, a reflection of heaven on earth. So when you see power remove, know that it's not just a cleansing, it's a commissioning. God is commissioning those who are ready to represent him with clarity, with courage, and with conviction. He's commissioning leaders who won't bow to culture but will stand on truth. He's calling up reformers who won't compromise under pressure. He's raising up sons and daughters who know his voice and obey without delay. And that means there's no more time to waste, no more time to sit around waiting for the right moment. This is the moment. When heaven shifts, you've got to move in sync. When God removes, you must respond. He doesn't remove influence just to leave a void. He makes space for righteousness to reign again. And if God is giving his people a chance to rise, then we must rise with reverence, with responsibility, and with readiness. Don't let this moment pass you by. Don't scroll past what God is trying to stir inside you, because there is a rising happening right now. It's not a trend. It's not a wave. It's a kingdom movement. And it needs your voice, your hands, your yes. What you thought was just a season of silence was actually God preparing your strength. What you thought was obscurity was actually divine positioning. And now that he's removed what needed to be removed, he's looking for those who will carry what's next with honor. Don't worry about whether you feel worthy. God doesn't call the qualified. He qualifies the called. He's not looking for the most impressive. He's looking for the most surrendered. So if you're willing, if you're available, if you're ready to be used for something bigger than yourself, then this is your moment. This is your time to rise. Because when power is removed, heaven doesn't hit pause. Heaven calls the righteous to rise up and lead.